Today we're talking about a super important topic, SEO reputation management. Too often, and unfortunately, this concept is only talked about in a moment of crisis. And today, not only are we going to talk about the strategies and tactics of dealing with that particular crisis, but we also want to take you through some strategies and tactics that can actually prepare you to prevent this kind of crisis and protect your brand from Google. My name is Bill Rice. I'm the founder of Kaleido, a digital marketing agency, and we're going to be back in a moment to discuss all of these details as we step up to the whiteboard. See you back in a sec. Okay, before we jump into the content this week, I would love for you to go down below here, hit that subscribe button, and hit the bell so that you'll get notified every time we bring new content to you. My whole goal here is to provide marketing directors and CMOs with actionable information about concepts like these and strategies and tactics that you need to be thinking about as a brand, as a larger company, and then break those down in such a way that you'll understand how to execute them and take actionable steps, whether it's with an agency or in-house. You'll know from strategy to detail exactly how to get better performance. So again, before we step up to the whiteboard, go down below, hit that subscribe button, and hit the bell. Okay, so today we're talking about SEO reputation management and specifically protecting yourself from Google. Now, Google in this context is not necessarily the bad guy, but unfortunately, because you don't have control over Google, these types of reputation crises that I'm going to kind of outline in detail before can significantly impact your messaging and your consumer, your customer's impression of you in any given moment. Because we all know that usually the first or second thing that any consumer does when they encounter your brand is go to Google and search you and take a look at what's online. So let's go through a very specific scenario that we run into a lot. We work in the legal profession, and particularly we're supporting a lot of personal injury firms and attorneys. And so this crisis is one that often hits this particular market. So let's talk about how that happens. So in a normal context of a legal firm, particularly a trial lawyer or a personal injury attorney, 90% of what they do is fairly routine and mundane, and they're supporting their victims, and they're doing all of that legal process in a fairly sort of boring, routine fashion. And as a result, 90% of those cases move through the system as they should appropriately. Victims are supported, defendants are engaged, and all of that sort of thing. And as a result, because it is just kind of the routine legal system doing its thing and providing justice, the actual search results for any given law firm or attorney is fairly boring and sleepy. However, every once in a while, and usually probably at least once or more times during the life of a firm or the career of an attorney, there will be a particular case that lights some sort of public interest. And then the media latches onto it. And we know how the media works, right? To sell newspapers, or now to sell and drive online traffic to a publication, controversy and negativity is kind of the driving motivations that they feed off of. And so there is a very good chance that if your particular case gets into the public's interest and eye of the media, then you're going to start to get some sort of negativity flowing into your search engine results. So we're going to talk about kind of how this works, and we're going to talk about how to fix it if it does happen, you're in crisis right now, or how to prevent it if you're in the advantageous position of you haven't had this happen to you. There are things that you should immediately start doing so that when that does happen, that you'll be in a better position to take back control of your brand and your messaging. Okay, so let's look at this fictitious search engine result page from Google that I've kind of simplified a little bit, and I've also opened up my my own law practice, which is not the case, right? But in this particular case, let's pretend for a moment that there is a Rice Law Group that is a personal injury firm. So this is a pretty typical search engine result page when we first get a client. And it probably looks a lot like your search engine result page if you're, again, not in that moment of crisis. And so some of the things that you're going to find on this page is simply, obviously, your home page. And because there's really nothing else for Google to kind of grab a hold of and index in here for a branded specific search for Rice Law Group, your web page is the best result and the most authoritative resource on who you are and what you are, right? So if nothing's going on at the moment, you're probably going to have a really nice sort of perfect search engine result. You're going to have your home page in here. You're going to get some additional results under there. Probably your attorney's page is going to be highlighted. Maybe your practice areas will be highlighted as a link, your about page or contact, your careers page. So you'll have a really advantageous and actually pretty meaty search engine result. It'll probably take up most of the above the fold on that page. And then as you go down here, you're likely to have maybe a couple other pages from your website, potentially a few blog post if you're doing any sort of content creation. And then as you move through, you likely, if you have a Facebook page, you're going to have a Facebook result for your brand. If you've done any sort of career listing for jobs and that sort of thing, you might have an Indeed listing or some sort of job site in here. A lot of times you'll see things like Yelp in here, even though it's kind of a retail. Yelp is, and a lot of those local directory sites are just really trying to grab any sort of location information, particularly with the advent of AI assistants on our phone. Often we're trying to figure out directions. So we'll say, how do I get to the Rice Law Group? So things like Yelp and Google Maps and those sorts of things are aggregating your address. So there's a good chance that will be in the search engine results. The other thing that's probably happening, especially if you've done a good job of just sort of taking control of the local directories, things like Google My Business in particular. If you've done that and created a good listing here, you'll also take up a big chunk of this side area in the page where it'll have pictures of your building and what it looks like inside, the conference room, the practice areas, the time, that sort of thing. So again, a perfect scenario, you kind of command this SERP, right? You can put anything you want in here by just doing a little bit of effort and just a little bit of technical SEO. You can kind of completely control this homepage because again, at this point in time, really Google doesn't have anything to work with other than what you give it. So this is going to be a really good page. Now, here's what happens in a crisis. If you were to look through all of these search engine results, so go ahead and Google your name now, and you look through all of those results, and assuming that you're not doing any sort of SEO proactive work at the moment, most of these pages in the view of Google are probably pretty weak in the sense that your homepage probably has a significant number of links, right? So this one's probably fairly strong. But any of your blog posts, you probably don't have a lot of traffic to it. You probably don't have a lot of backlinks. You probably don't have a lot of time on site. Again, because you're not proactively, that's not what you're focused on, right? You're focused on your cases and your clients and those sorts of things. And so you're probably not really focused on this. Your Facebook page is probably not great, right? So this is probably not a very strong result. And, maybe your career site, your job listings are usually a flash in the pan in the moment sort of thing. So Google doesn't think that's necessarily the best of results. So when something happens in the news, this is what happens to your search result. So first thing that happens usually is this goes away because you're now a news item, right? And so that becomes less important. And so now Google needs this space, right? They have other things to report about you, so they need the space. So they immediately start to simplify this search result and get more content in it because they have more content to provide. So the other thing, that goes away, right? Now you got this really simple, so you'll start to probably still rank here at the top for this one result. And then a lot of times these will get pushed down. So what will start to happen is Rice Law Group in trouble, right? So you'll get this, and it'll be from be from the Detroit Free Press, right? It'll be from the Tribune. Whatever these powerful, if you're in a big city, these powerful newspapers will start to come in here. And so you'll have a SERP that takes over there. And then you'll get another one in here, probably another article. Maybe you have one pop. If it's actually kind of the Detroit Free Press, this will probably pop to the top. And it'll have things like, fraud, scam, whatever, starts to sneak in there, right? And it's from these really powerful sites, right? That have any sort of news site is going to have a lot of power. Even these small regionals start to have a lot of power because they have lots of backlinks. They have lots of reputation in general. You will trust news sources because they're journalists and they're doing that research. So these things will start to pop off the page, and you'll start to get uglier stuff. Concern over Rice case. So again, you'll start to get all of these really nasty things in here. And so at the end of the day, this will probably pop down here to like maybe a 3 or a 4 position. And this will be kind of all that's left in that SERP after this crisis, right? Because this didn't have much strength, right? All of these pages have lots of strength. As soon as they light off, they're going to get tons of traffic. They're probably going to get a bunch of backlinks. There's maybe going to be some sort of this flowing down of these. So once a major paper writes something, or something comes from the court, or potentially something comes out of the court record and that sort of thing, all of that material, that core content, starts to get reported on and distributed to other sites that are already powerful, right? So that report from the court is going to show up here in Detroit. They're going to write a big, Detroit Free Press is going to write a big article. And then from there, all these little regional players are going to look at that article and they're going to reproduce their own version of that. And then a bunch of law sites and law blogs, again, they love to feed on negativity. So all these little law blogs that want to, or even directories maybe that you're listed in, they're fueled by traffic, right? And so they're going to write a little blog post on it, and that's going to pop up in here. Maybe it's such a significant case that some of the trade publications and those sorts of things are going to play in here. But anyway, a whole bunch of people are going to cover that, and it's going to give Google tons of extra information to fill out this SERP, and you will lose control of it almost immediately. And then, because you haven't done the prep work on your site, or potentially to protect against this, you're going to have to do a lot of work to push these things down because you're starting from a position of weakness. Okay. So that's the scenario, right? That's the scenario we're trying to prevent with this information. And that's the scenario, if we're in crisis, we're going to have to overcome. Because we will literally be, if you're not working on this today, if this crisis hits you, you will literally be standing in a hole, and you'll be up to your neck in that hole, and you're going to have to crawl your way out of it in order to kind of overcome this. And this, again, from a point of weakness, is probably something that's going to not take you days or months. It's going to take you years to overcome. Okay, so let's go now to something, kind of the practical part of this, and let's talk about the strategies. So in order to influence a Google search engine result page, there's really only a few things that you can do. And so this is super helpful in starting to figure out, okay, what of these strategies are we going to turn into actionable tactics? So here's kind of the lay of the land. Here's what you can do if something like this has happened to you. Here's really your only options, right? You can change who ranks on this page, right? And you're already in a little bit of a deficit. Because the people that are going to move on to this page are definitely going to be stronger than you are because, again, you haven't been working on this. You're going to attempt to change the rank order. This is the strategy most times you'll hear SEO firms talk about, or just because you've heard this as the main strategy, you'll come in and you'll ask for this, and you'll say, hey, I've got all these negative results on my page. What can we do to push them down, right? But really, it's only one of 5 different things that we can do. We can change the content that actually ranks on that page. So what Google actually picks out to talk about. This is kind of similar of kind of pushing things around, but we can create content and potentially get that content to come up here, or find content that already exists and try to make that stronger, which is a tactic that we've used. Change what Google features on this page, right? So like I said, like this feature is being taken away. All of those kind of sub results have been taken away. Those are all Google features. So there's a potential to create a set of tactics that actually encourages Google to add those features back into the page, or add new features. And then shift the search demand. So potentially shift what people are searching for to something other than this, particular negative sort of search. And so when we're talking about search demand, one of the easiest ways to kind of see this is when you search in Google. So the best place to do that is put that in your brand and then leave a space, and then see what are the other sort of modified searches that people are looking for. And that's kind of the demand. And if you're in a crisis, you're going to see all those negative results. And so that's important to know what those are, because we can also potentially shift what people are looking at in the search demand. Okay, so now let's get to the actionable part. How can we actually go about fixing the problem, right? And so all of these tactics will do one or more, will impact one or more of these strategies and execute, okay? So one thing is, and this is something that can help you a little bit, but this is definitely more of an offensive strategies, is you could just work proactively to make sure that your pages that are already showing up in your search engine result are getting a significant number of links, right? There's all kinds of opportunities out there to get links, to work with other sites, to show them what you're doing, and to advocate your site actually being featured or being linked to, or at least mentioned in what they're doing. So again, getting links back to not just your main page. We're going to talk about some of these other things in here, but not just your main page, but other supporting pages, your attorney pages, your individual attorneys pages. It's important to, so often, again, law firms are made up on top of, or have the strength of, a couple of partners' names as part of the brand, or the partners are just a core part of the reputation of the firm. So it's not only important to protect the firm's name, but it's also really important to protect the brand and the reputation of your individual attorneys online. So that's kind of a subset of this exercise, is really to go below the firm and look at each of those attorneys' profiles and search engine results and see if there's anything that needs to be done there. And again, those are great sources for getting links, and those overall links help the whole site, right? So if you've got a really active attorney that does a lot of seminars, maybe does some adjunct teaching, is represented or speaks a lot with industry groups and that sort of thing, there are lots of opportunities to get links back, not only to that attorney, but to the overall site. Okay, so links, we know about that. Pitching journalists, bloggers, and editors. This is, if you're in a crisis, this is really going to be kind of your lean forward moment where you're going to have to really get good at PR. But this is something that you should be doing before. You want to practice these skills before you're in a crisis. But if you're in a crisis, you're going to need to reach out to a really capable PR firm and have them help you become an instant success at this. So, but in an offensive strategy, reaching out to journalists, bloggers, and editors, just continually have a process whereby you're pitching the good things that you're doing. And it doesn't always have to be in the context of your legal activity. It could be philanthropic. It could be, again, talking at industry groups, supporting different sort of particular interest groups and that sort of thing. So there's always things to talk about. And it's just really thinking with that PR mind to make sure. It's also really important too, journalist is super critical, because while you're doing this in an offensive way, you're actually building reputation with the people that are going to cover a potential crisis or negative story about you, right? So building some personal reputation with these bloggers and journalists can be really powerful if a crisis hits, because they'll already know who you are. And now if you get some sort of allegation against you or some sort of negative review against you, they will know you as an individual. They will know your character. And that is just going to invariably influence the way that they're going to cover that particular story. Creating your own content. There are all kinds of places like Medium, Huffington Post, Forbes that are really authoritative. And probably if you've never had this conversation before, you might be surprised when I say things like Forbes and Inc. You're like, wait, I thought they had journalists and I would be pitching journalists. Well, no, actually, a lot of these online sites actually get their content from individuals like yourself, business owners, freelancers, content creators, all people that you can access in order to regularly publish on these high authority sites. And they feel and look very much like a news site, and oftentimes Google will use them as such, right? So if you get a listing in here from Forbes or from Huffington Post, there's a good potential that they will be as strong as, or can be as strong as, something you would get from a local or regional newspaper publication online. Influence reviews. If you do see that you have things like Facebook, you see Google listings in there, Google Map listings, Yelp, it can be really important for you to strengthen those results by influencing the reviews you get. Now, I'm going to put the caveat here, put a little exclamation point, that has to comply with the terms of services of these sites. But that's relatively simple to do. This strategy doesn't mean that you go and you buy reviews or you tell people to give you 5-star. Just if you are, and you probably are, giving a good experience to your clients, just simply asking them and making it easy, maybe create a little card or you put it in an email with a quick link and asking them, hey, could you please leave a review? And making that a regular part of your interaction with your clients will just naturally pump those reviews up and strengthen those individual results. So in a crisis, they will have some strength and they won't get immediately removed or pushed down. There can be legal actions. Again, as if you're an attorney listening to this, you know all about these. There's trademark, there's DC digital content management, DCMA. So there's all kinds of kind of legal procedures that if somebody puts content out there that is inaccurate or somehow slanderous or defamation, there are contexts with which you can legally take action to have those removed, either through Google directly or through the offending party. So again, that's something you talk to your attorney about, but there are legal. Branding and influencer marketing. Again, this is something you should be making, just like journalists, you should be making reputation relationships. And those people who are the influencers in your industry and talk about your industry, those are the type of people that you want to build a relationship with, especially those who, and keep context in mind when you're doing these sorts of things, right? If you find somebody who may be super influential and they have a particular there's a reason that you want to make that relationship and nurture that relationship, but it may not necessarily be a digital relationship. But there may be somebody else that may be not as influential in your market, in your community. However, they are online very influential. So that's a different kind of relationship. So look for those. Don't just necessarily think the people that you encounter in the real world that you say, hey, I've got to network with that person. I've got to make them a part of my group. I've got to make them a part of my network. I want to do deals with them and partner with them, that sort of thing. Don't just sit there. Look online and see who equivalently maybe has more influence online, and they don't have that kind of real world influence, but they're significantly influent online. So look for those. Reshaping suggested searches within your pages. This is a content exercise, definitely an offensive strategy. Start to get some homogeneity to how you talk about things, right? The words and the terms you use. If you're looking through that search and you're finding those other searches that people are using, that where that demand is, start using some of that terminology. Too often we actually get in using our internal language and we forget about sort of how the common client comes to us and what they look for and how they talk about things and the words they use, because they're not they don't know our business as well. So it's really important to start to understand that and start to reshape the content inside of your pages so that you can just simply get those pages into those high demand search results. Using sites that influence Google feature. We talked a lot about this already. If you're seeing things like local listings in there, if you're seeing other competitors in your space in those local listings, if you're kind of a retail shop, It can be really important to make sure that your Google My Business is working correctly and that you put time and energy into that. If Yelp is showing up there, you put time and energy into Yelp. If you have a Facebook listing, put time and energy into kind of building that community on Facebook and strengthening that. So if you see features showing up or maybe snippets, definitions and that sort of thing, really leverage and optimize those so that those features will remain in a crisis. Keyword-specific domains. In very, very limited circumstances, there may be an opportunity to leverage that and strengthen an additional resource inside of the SERP by using a keyword-specific domain. But I think a lot of this tactic, the ship has sailed, except for in very specific cases. So not necessarily one I would normally advocate. And then monitoring. Monitoring is super, super critical. You need to always be monitoring so you know when it happens and you can get as early into the game as you can. So always be monitoring your brand. Always be on the lookout for anything that can impact. And this can also be from a positive. If you get some positive traction, you really want to build that up. Like you want to take advantage of that. So if someone is talking good about you in a positive way, reach out and figure out what you can do to continue to amplify that message or potentially showcase that message, which gets them all kinds of excited because their content is being influenced by you and getting a new and greater audience. So this works both negatively and positively. If you have positive, let's just put energy and work into that. Okay, we've gone through a lot of content today about SEO reputation management. I'd love to continue the discussion. I'm sure I've inspired a bunch of questions in the comments. So please leave comments. Of course, subscribe and hit that notification button so you'll know when the next one comes.